to Lattes Art, where we sip on espressos and celebrate the world of creativity. I'm your host, James William Moore, and this episode is presented by J Squared Atelier. Today, we're talking about a Baroque rebel, a painter of divine drama and raw humanity, a man whose work, despite being centuries old, continues to stir souls across generations. And what better entry point than this? Pope Francis once said that he favors Caravaggio, not Michelangelo, not Raphael, but Caravaggio, the hot-headed, shadow-drenched, emotionally charged master of tenebrism. Why would a pope align himself with such a turbulent figure? That's what we're diving into on this episode. In 2013, just months after becoming pope, Francis was asked which artist moved him. He didn't hesitate. He said Caravaggio, specifically naming the calling of St. Matthew. And if you've seen that painting, you can understand why. The moment Jesus enters the tavern and points at Matthew, who points back at himself, eyes wide in disbelief, it's not distant or polished. It's human. It's earthy. A spiritual revelation that feels like it could happen at your kitchen table. To Pope Francis, a Jesuit, deeply concerned with humility and inclusion, Caravaggio's work hits a nerve. This isn't gilded glory. It's dirty feet. It's bruised skin and grace amidst the mess. Let's take a closer look at the painting. There's a group of men counting coins at a table. Suddenly, a beam of light cuts through the shadows. A barefoot Jesus, nearly in silhouette, raises his hand and points. One of the men, in disbelief, points at himself. Me? It's that moment of surprise, of transformation, that Caravaggio painted so masterfully. And it's that painting, The Calling of St. Matthew, painted in 1600, hangs in the Contarelli Chapel of San Luigi de Franceschi in Rome, that Pope Francis has said he keeps returning to. The painting is massive, about 10 by 11 feet, and it's dark, like really dark. The scene? A group of 5 tax collectors hunched over a table counting money. They're dressed in contemporary 1600s clothing, not biblical robes. They're in a tavern, not a temple. They look like people you'd find in a side street bar near the Spanish Steps. And then, stage right, Christ steps in, but he doesn't look central. He almost blends into the shadows. Behind him is St. Peter, just a hint of gold in his beard, gently pushing forward. And then there's that gesture, Jesus pointing calmly towards one of the men at the table. And the man? He points back at himself. Me? That's Matthew, or at least it becomes him. Caravaggio doesn't show the miracle itself. He shows the second before it. That fragile human who me moment, it's a painting about hesitation, about invitation to change your life. Caravaggio uses light like a playwright uses a monologue. It tells the story. A strong diagonal beam slices across the composition from upper right to lower left. This isn't sunlight, it's divine light. It falls across Matthew and the others like a spotlight from heaven, as if God is saying, "Look here, pay attention." But here's the thing. The light touches more than just Matthew. It touches the whole table. Everyone gets a little grace, whether or not they accept it. This isn't just technical, it's theological. It says that salvation is offered, not forced. The calling comes quietly, like the light drifting into the dark room. No angels, no gold halos, just shadow, illumination, and choice. Pope Francis once said this image represents his own life. In fact, he said that every time he visits Rome, he tries to see it. The moment of Matthew pointing to himself, me, was for Francis a mirror of his own calling. You can see why it resonates Francis is a pope of humility. He rides in a fiat. He washes the feet of prisoners. He speaks of mercy, always mercy. And here is Caravaggio painting mercy, not as something abstract, but as something disruptive, an act of love. Matthew is not expecting to be chosen. He's doing his job. He's counting coins, caught in the system of power and money. And Jesus sees him. It's that gaze, that invitation, that soft insistence that still changes people today. Caravaggio is revolutionary because he made the sacred immediate. He didn't idealize his figures. He cast real people with dirt under their nails and creases in their brows. There's tension in their bodies. Some look suspicious. One barely lifts his head. This wasn't how saints were supposed to look in art, but it was how people really looked. And Caravaggio, despite or maybe because of his own turbulent life, knew that God doesn't wait for perfection. That's why this painting still knocks the air out of your lungs. It's immediate, it's cinematic, and it suggests that holiness can interrupt us at any moment. In a back room, at a table, in the middle of life's routine. We live in a world full of noise, full of curated perfection, filters, and surface level connections. But the calling of St. Matthew reminds us that the divine often arrives unannounced, quiet, but unmistakable. And more importantly, it asks, what would you do if someone pointed a finger at you out of nowhere and said, "Follow me"? Would you hesitate? Would you doubt? Or would you get up? Pope Francis sees himself in Matthew. Maybe we all do. That startled me isn't just a reaction, it's a threshold, a doorway between we are and who we might become. Caravaggio bursts onto the Roman art scene in the late 1500s with something totally new: truth. His subjects were saints, yes, but they looked like real people. Prostitutes modeled for virgins, street brawlers became martyrs. There was no idealization, no softening of the rough edges. His signature style, tenebrism, used intense contrast between light and dark to carve drama right out of the canvas. It wasn't just technique, it was a philosophy. The divine emerges not in spite of darkness, but through it. In a way, he invented spiritual realism. His Christ was not remote. He entered rooms full of sinners, shadows, and self-doubt. Sound familiar? Let's not romanticize him too much. Michelangelo Merisi de Caravaggio was complicated. He had a violent temper, killed a man in a street fight, and fled Rome as a fugitive. He lived like a sinner, but painted like someone desperate for redemption. And this duality is likely part of what attracts Pope Francis. In Caravaggio, he sees not just artistic genius, but a theology of mercy, of flawed humanity still worthy of grace. Think of the Incredulity of St. Thomas, a painting where Jesus guides Thomas's finger into his wound. There's no scolding, just invitation, empathy. It's radical, it's tender, and mirrors Francis's message that doubt and imperfection don't push us away from God. They pull us closer. The Incredulity of St. Thomas, painted around 1601 to 1602, captures a moment straight from the Gospel of John. It's that famous passage where Thomas says, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." And then Jesus appears and says, "Do it." Caravaggio doesn't paint the before or after. He paints the exact moment Thomas touches the wound. It's almost surgical. Thomas's brow is furrowed, his eyes squinting in disbelief, not because he doubts, but because he can't believe what he's feeling. His finger pushes into Christ's side, guided by Jesus' own hand. Two other disciples lean in, peering like curious scientists. No halos, no light from heaven, just three regular men crowding in around a resurrected body. It's clinical, it's earthy, it's unbelievably human. This is classic Caravaggio, deep shadow, tight framing, and that almost uncomfortable realism. The background is entirely dark, like a void. There is no setting, no temple, no clouds, no gold leaf, just four men in a black box of mystery. The light falls hard and direct from the left, carving the scene out of darkness. It catches the folds in the linen, the oily skin of aging hands, the gloss of the wound. And then there's Jesus, calm, patient. His expression is neutral, even a bit resigned, like he knew this was coming. He's not offended by Thomas's doubt. Instead, he invites it. He guides it. Jesus physically holds Thomas's hand and presses it into his side. That detail alone flips the entire story on its head. It's not Thomas reaching out in desperation. It's Jesus pulling him in. This is where the painting gets really powerful, especially in a spiritual context, like Pope Francis's. Caravaggio isn't painting a reprimand. There's no fire or brimstone. No ye of little faith. Instead, there's compassion. It's a God who says, if this is what you need to believe, touch me. It's tactile, grounded, real. Faith in this painting isn't ethereal, it's sensory. And this speaks volumes about Francis's approach to belief. The idea that doubt isn't a threat, it's a path. That faith sometimes needs proof, and that's okay. That being human, curious, skeptical, even stubborn, is not an obstacle to grace. In a way, the Incredulity of St. Thomas might be Caravaggio's most relatable work, because aren't we all Thomas sometimes? We live in an age of misinformation, spiritual fatigue, and endless scrolling. We ask what's real, what's worth of belief, where is the proof? And Caravaggio doesn't answer with a sermon. He answers with a wound, a hand, a look. He invites us to lean in, to ask the hard questions, and to still be held. Caravaggio's influence didn't end with the Baroque. You see echoes of him in film noir, chiaroscuro photography, even Scorsese's use of light and morality. Modern painters too, from Francis Bacon to contemporary realist painters, owe a debt to Caravaggio's unapologetic human gaze. And in church corridors, you still see tourists gasping when they stumble upon his work because it feels real. Not just beautiful, it's true. So when Pope Francis favored Caravaggio, he wasn't just picking a style, he was aligning with a vision. That holiness isn't found in perfection, but in presence. That art can meet people where they are, flawed, fractured, and reaching for light. Caravaggio reminds us that art doesn't have to be polite to be sacred. Sometimes the divine shows up in the dark corners, in the questions, not just the answers. Thanks for joining me today. If you've never seen The Calling of St. Matthew or The Incredulity of St. Thomas, we've got you covered. You'll find links to high-quality images and a few extra resources right there in the show notes. So go take a look, zoom in on the light, the hands, the expressions, and see for yourself why Caravaggio still stops us in our tracks. Let that silver of light move you. Until next time, keep sipping on those espressos, keep seeing art in all of the corners of your world, and keep creating. This is James William Moore, and this has been Lattes Art, brought to you by J Squared Atelier.